Also, another trick that a lot of people do is they'll tie it with the skin facing down and the fibers facing up, but actually flip it over. One of my guides explained it to me that most tarpon hit from below and they come up. I think the biggest question that I get asked at the shop is, and it's a big misconception that I usually try to explain to people, is about the color of the fly. I think the major thing that tarpon are targeting up here are bait fish patterns or bait fish. Pogies, pinfish, and mullet are probably our top three. Pogies are actually called Gulf menhaden. We call them pogies. Crabbers call them fatbacks, greenbacks. There's all kinds of different names for them, but that's probably the main target that they are going after up here. Also mullet, when the mullets school up. A little less is floating blue crabs that they'll target. So most everything around here is they target the menhaden is the primary one, and also the striped mullet, which is our common bait fish around here.
So the mullet, they school up. What time of year do they normally school up? Is there a certain time of year for that?
Not really. They're here all year round. We'll start to see schools in the summertime, and you'll start to see those videos on social media where they're busting them in the late summer. You'll see the tarpon busting them on the beach, which is pretty fun to watch. For us, it's mostly they're always around. There's always thousands in schools. Used to be a popular fish for the commercial fishermen. It's a little less now, but the mullet and probably the menhaden is the more popular fish that we target and more popular fish that we try to mimic. I think the pogies have a higher fat content, a higher oil content, so they get more energy per bait fish than a mullet does. So the pogies are around here, especially in the Gulf Coast, are a commercially sought after fish, large commercial pogie boats that you'll see over, and especially in Louisiana and Port St. Joe, things like that. So I think that's what they're up here really targeting.
So fatty fish maybe taste a little better too, huh?
Yeah. A lot more bang for your buck, I think, per fish than a mullet.
Yeah. I remember we used to vacation at Mexico Beach, and there was some guy that would come out there every night, and he would stand there with a net, just stand there he looked like a blue heron. He would stand there in the same position on that old pier that used to be there that got blown down now, but on Pier Road. And he would stand there for hours and not move. And then all of a sudden, he'd be on point, throw that net out there, and he'd get a bunch of mullet. There were a lot of times that he would, struggle getting it up the pier, I should say. So I'd almost date myself, but that was probably back in the early 90s that I remember seeing him down
it's fun to watch, to drive down the Forgotten Coast and watch the guys that are out there in chest deep water throwing 12, 14, 16 foot cast nets at mullet. It's really impressive that they can even throw them. But they're pretty productive. I've watched them. I pull over and watch them all the time, and they'll get a mess load of them, and usually there's somebody on the bank that grabs the bucket and runs out with them, and they're pretty productive at doing that.
I can't imagine standing out in chest deep water, period. Not with some of the things that I've stood on a boat and looked at out there. So
yeah, we've seen some big hammerheads over the last couple of seasons come in during tarpon season.
I haven't seen a really big one, but I've seen one that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck for sure, but not the really, really big ones that you hear about. From high atop the world headquarters of Southeastern Fly, this is the Southeastern Fly Podcast. Thanks for stopping in and giving us a listen. Feel free to share this with your friends and your fishing partners, unless you want to keep the information for yourself. Subscribe and follow so that you'll be the first to know when an episode drops. Remember, we have the Podcast by Southeastern Fly Facebook group, and they have provided us with direction on where we want to take this podcast. It's not just all what David wants. A lot of times it's what they want, and it's really cool to see the way that this thing has evolved, and hopefully it's evolved to where you want to keep on listening. If you find value in the podcast, please drop by the southeasternfly.com/store. That's where the merch is. Explore the merch, and that's what makes this podcast go. We have hats and t-shirts and stickers, and we've got a new turbidity t-shirt. If you've listened to the podcast back early on this year, you know exactly what we're talking about as far as the turbidity t-shirt goes. We've got a Southeastern Fly dry fly hats and logo hats. We've got a new Morning Run Flats skiff t-shirt. There's a little story behind that, and that's if you go look that up, there's a story behind us running out to the Chandelier Islands from Louisiana out to the islands in a 20-foot skiff. on a morning run. Two boats going out with 4 anglers, 2 guides, and we just had a fantastic day. We've got more fly fishing, less meetings, decals out there. We've got a whole lot of stuff out there. Thanks to all the folks who have already supported the show through their purchases. I appreciate your support, and like I said, that's what helps keep this podcast on the air. So if you find value and you can go out there and take a look at something, you see something you like, go ahead and purchase. We sure would appreciate it. So who are we talking with on this episode? He's the owner and chief fly tyer of the Forgotten Coast Fly Company. He's located in historic downtown Apalachicola, Florida, where I've spent a little bit of time. He's designed fly patterns such as the Renegade. It's been published in several magazines as well as online. He is on the pro staff at Dinah King, A-Rex Hooks, and Gulf Fly Fishing. So let's give a warm welcome to Kevin Burdette. Kevin, thanks for stopping by the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I guess probably the big question that a lot of people ask, and I've definitely asked it myself, how in the world did the area of the Forgotten Coast become the Forgotten Coast?
That's a good question. Yeah, we get asked that quite a bit. I think if you came to the area, you'd see why it was called the Forgotten Coast. But technically, it was a marketing scheme in the 80s from one of the governors. And he basically just chopped up the Florida coast and called each one of the sections a different name. We have the Emerald Coast, you have Space Coast. And so there's all different ones. And we, I guess, got labeled the Forgotten Coast, mostly been forgotten, but I think everybody enjoys that and appreciates that. And most people that live here, they want to be here and they want to be forgotten. So that's why it's here.
I've been all up and down that coast, I guess from probably over in Alabama, Fort Morgan, all the way down to Big Bend. And right in there where your shop is, that area it's probably about 30 or 40 miles. It's about a 40-minute drive. The piece that I like is about a 40-minute drive from one end to the other. And it is a great place to go. I really kind of hate to tell anybody about it, but that's what makes y'all go. So I don't mind getting the word out and that sort of thing. I just don't want everybody down there the particular week that I'm going to go, or if we come back for a fishing trip, I don't want anybody around there then. But anyway, that's I guess I'm a little bit greedy there, but we've been going down there since the late 80s. Speaking of dating myself, it's a great place to go. Fairly quick getaway. It's a good place to escape. I guess that's probably about the best way for me to say it.
Yeah, it's definitely stepping into a different world when it's nothing corporate around here. We really have to fight to keep it that way, and we want to keep it that way, and that's kind of our goal. All the young entrepreneurs in the area, we're trying our hardest to keep it this way because we love it. We all moved here for this reason, and that's really what we want to keep it. We want to keep this. It's kind of cliche-ish. They call it the old, the last piece of the true old Florida, but it really is. It's really rare to go anywhere, especially on the coast of Florida, and see anything like this. It's kind of like stepping back in time.
Yeah, all the let's just take the restaurants, for instance. The only thing there I think that is chain is probably a Subway, and those are individually owned. For the most part, there may be some corporate ones in there, but I don't know of anything else down there that's not a local person owning it or running it.
No, not in Appalachia. Port St. Joe has some, but yeah, Appalachia, St. George, Subway is the only one.
Excellent shrimp because it's a shrimping community too. There's a lot of shrimp boats and stuff there. There's just a lot in the oysters, of course, are a little bit going on with that, but still good oysters in the area. One of my favorite places anyway. I don't want to gush all over it, but yeah, it's good thing. So let's wrap up that tarpon discussion. Now that we understand the food types that anglers should try to imitate, since you're in the fly business, what are the 3 fly patterns that should be in every angler's Forgotten Coast tarpon box?
The 3 that I would pick, as far as stock patterns, I would say would be a bait fish, because like I said, the major thing that we're trying to mimic is the pogey. So a bait fish pattern like an EP peanut butter or something that style, a flat bait fish, 3 to 6 inches, nice taper on it, 1/0, 2/0 hook. Is about as big as we go. We see some people bring in 3-4/0, and it's just too big of a hook. So that's always something to have, different patterns, different sizes or colors of that. That's definitely necessity because, like I said, the pogies are the number one meal around here. The next one would probably be a tarpon toad or bunny. It's 2 different patterns, but we'll lump them together. They're definitely useful. They're pretty standard tarpon flies. Everybody has them. Really useful around here. There's probably between those 2, those are what you'll see almost every guide throwing some variation of it. Usually the tarpon toad or bunny has a twist on it that the guide has that makes it his own, but they're all pretty much the same pattern. The third one's kind of a new pattern, and it is the game changer. And like its name, it really has changed things down here. I'd say probably a couple years ago, maybe 2 summers ago, Mangum and that group brought it down here, really changed the way that the tarpon reacted to flies. By the time the tarpon get up here, they've seen about everything as they've headed up the coast, started the Keys, you got Tampa, Homosassa, and by the time they get here, they've seen about every pattern you can think of. So when they brought in the game changer, it really, really changed everything. It's such a nice design fly. Probably the 3 that I would say without bringing in now. For me, I kind of mashed a couple of those up and made a game changer. Wouldn't call it a game changer, a bait fish and a tarpon bunny, but I don't use bunny. I like to use possum strips instead of bunny. Possum has a longer fiber on it, and the skin of the possum's tougher than a rabbit. The way that I run my monofilament loop through it, I'll run it actually through the tail instead of, some people will do a horizontal loop. I do it actually through the tail to prevent fouling. But when you do that with a bunny strip, the leather on the bunny is pretty tender, and you can actually, I've seen it where people are back casting and the bunny will rip in half at that point. So I've switched over to possum, and that's really helped that. And it looks really good. And the possum has a natural black tip on the fiber. So no matter what color it is, it always has that black tip on it, and it's really nice in the water. And then for the head of my Renegade, I would just use a 3-inch Foxy brush and wrap it around a couple times, stroke it back and finish it off. And it makes a really nice profile in the water. It's been a really, really productive pattern for me. And most of my guides throw it for me, and we've had really good luck on it. It's
been a while since I've cruised through the fly shop and looked at what was on the wall. Where do you get the best possum?
Probably the side of the street is good possum. Okay. There's always roadkill.
Right.
So the best possum right now is Wapsie. You can get the whole pelt if you call them, or you go to a Wapsie dealer. They can get a whole pelt cut for you, or you can buy it. It's called Awesome Possum, and it's just as anchored possum strips for you.
Yep.
I buy the whole pelt because I like to make mine a little bit wider. Most possum comes in standard or magnum, but I like to go even a little bit wider than magnum. I cut mine in 8mm strips, and it gives a little bit wider profile. Also, another trick that a lot of people do is they'll tie it with the skin facing down and the fibers facing up, but actually flip it over. One of my guides explained it to me that most tarpon hit from below and they come up.
Right.
So if you tie it with the skin facing down, they will see the profile and stuff, but it also sees that skin strap. So if you flip it over and tie it what most people consider upside down, then it actually sees the fibers as it's coming up, and it gives it a better profile and look. So most of mine look weird because I flip over the bunny or the possum on it, but we found that's a better profile, and it looks better for the tarpon.
I tell you, Kevin, if you think about it, most fish do eat up.
Yeah, they really do. And part of it, I think when people tie flies, they tie it for, it's kind of a joke that you're also trying to catch the angler, yes, in the fly shop. So, it does look odd if it's flipped over and the fiber's down compared to what most people are looking at. But if you actually think about it, 99% of tarpon are looking up at the fly. So they're going to come up from underneath it, and it really makes a big difference.
You'd almost want to make a great big one that's 2 or 3 foot long and hang it from the ceiling and say, hey, this is what the fish sees.
That's a good idea, yeah.
So, and I want to go back and talk just a minute, not long, but just a minute. You're talking about 1 or 2 hooks, streamer hooks or saltwater hooks. Most people think, oh, I need a really, really big hook for tarpon because it's a really, really big fish. I mean, we fish for muskie here. There's some big hooks, wide gaps, stuff like that. I was talking to David Hanka, and we were talking about suspending the fly. Right, so getting it in the zone and suspending it out there to where it wasn't like sinking to the bottom, so you could like move it and really kind of pulling a string with a cat or something like that. And those smaller, little bit lighter hooks are better. And like you said, this is David Perry speak, but I think you're right. I think those fish have come all the way up from the Keys, and really who knows where they come from, all the way up the west coast of Florida, and they see all kinds of stuff thrown at them, these big chains of fish. Everybody's out there throwing stuff at them, and I think that fish are like, yeah, I've seen something big like that before and it didn't work out, or something doesn't look natural about that great big fly out there. Let's talk about that just a minute. See, is that kind of one of the things about going with that smaller hook?
Yeah, I think part of it is proportions. Most of the pogie is 3 to 5 inches. And when you put a 3 to 4 hook on it, it's not proportional, and it also oversizes and overweights it. So it's partly proportional. And the way that they make the steel these days, I mean, some hooks, they're going to bend out. So you definitely need to do your research on your best tarpon hooks. And there's plenty of research out there on those. And every guide and every fisherman has their own brand that they like. 2-aught hooks will definitely hook a tarpon and keep them. You won't lose it, won't bend out. So it's the smaller you can go, the better, but you also have to worry about them catching a large one and it bending out. So I think 2-aughts are a really good choice for everything that we've kind of see around here when it comes to that. Anything bigger than that is just too big. It's unproportional with if I had a 4-inch or a 4-aught hook, I would have to tie a 6 to 8 inch probably bait fish pattern to make it proportional for what I'm looking for. So a lot of it's proportional.
Okay, that makes total sense. Let's put down the tarpon rods just a minute, and let's open up the redfish box. There are some great redfish down there, and there are some times during the year that there are some really nice big redfish as well. Yeah, they're not all slot reds down there. I've seen some really nice ones and had some shots at some really nice ones. Let's transition over to redfish, and we'll bring in triple tail here too, just a little bit, okay? Put down that tarpon rod. We're going to pick up a redfish rod. Let's start with describing the main bodies of water that make up the Forgotten Coast. And you don't have to give away any super secret spots or anything like that, but just give the angler an idea. Give us all an idea, because I'm sure I'll learn something here as well. Give us an idea of the types of water, the bodies of water, the names and stuff like that folks will be looking at when they come down there.
Yeah, definitely. The Forgotten Coast stretches from about Mexico Beach, or just east of Panama City, all the way to over about St. Mark's Lighthouse, give or take. So usually what I'll do, I'll start from the east side, which is St. Mark's, and work my way west and kind of describe the bays and different ones. And the beauty of this area is that each little bay that I'm going to describe is a completely different fishery. And that's the beauty of it, is that from Appalachia, I can drive an hour east or an hour west and fish 4 almost completely separate fisheries. And that's one thing that we love about this area. And I've been here for almost 10 years and I still haven't fished all the waters. It's just so much water around here to fish. But starting on the east, the St. Mark's is a little bay. It's called the Apalachicola Bay. Includes St. Mark's, Panacea area, and then also the Ocklawakanee River, the mouth of it. And then as you come around the mouth of it, you cross Alligator Point or Alligator Harbor, Bald Point area, and you start to head due west. Inside of that is Alligator Harbor, which is where most of the commercial clams and oysters are raised. They're spreading out now, but that's kind of where the original aquaculture started. And then as we head east or west from that, we're going to hit St. George Sound, which is a large body of water. And one thing that for the readers that don't know this, or the listeners, is that we are bays that have barrier islands. So we have a chain of barrier islands off of the coast that starts Dog Island, which is not really occupied. There's some houses on it. Great fishing around that. And then if you head west of that, you have St. George and then Little St. George, which at one time was connected, but then the government put an inlet through it, or a cut. We call it the cut, but it's also called Bob Sykes Cut or Government Cut. Then you have Little St. George west of that, and then you have St. Vincent, which is the last barrier on there. St. Vincent's unique because it's where they breed red wolves to reintroduce into North Carolina. And then also the previous owner, before the state owned it, he was a wealthy man, and he brought in exotic deer and things. So you can still hunt exotic deer on St. Vincent. It's a lottery and things. So that's kind of neat. But the bays, the way they go is you have St. George Sound, which is basically between Dog Island and the mainland. And then when you cross over the bridge that goes to St. George, you enter into Apalachicola Bay, which is the main bay that most everybody just generalizes it as Apalachicola, but it's actually split up into smaller ones. Apalachicola Bay is the main bay from the island, or from the bridge over to St. Vincent. And then when you get from St. Vincent, between that and the mainland, you have St. Vincent Sound. And then once you go west out of that, you go through Indian Pass, which gets you out into open water. And then as you continue to head west, you'll see that the Cape has its little elbow. Below that's called Stump Hole, which is a pretty popular spot. And then when you round that corner, you get onto the Cape Sandblast beaches. And then if you take that all the way north, wraps around into St. Joseph Bay, which is a really beautiful bay. It's where we do our scalloping. Doesn't have a river input, so there's not the same kind of shrimp and things like that we see in Apalachicola Bay, but the water is really clear. And then north of that, you get into Mexico Beach, and you get into that really pretty green water that you see in Destin, all that. That kind of, it's the same gyre, but the waters are completely different from St. George to Cape San Blas. It's two totally different gyres of water. So it's completely different fishing and different waters and different colors and things like that. So it's a really unique area.
On the Cape, at the stump hole, there's all those big rocks there that they keep throwing there and throwing there. And at one time, I've got a friend that grew up there. He's getting ready to retire from his job, so he's been around a little bit. Let's just say that. He said that used to be a cut there, and they just basically started trying to fill it in back when he was a little kid. He thought that there used to be a cut there, so it would have been open water there, I guess right above the stump hole or below, whichever way you want to point it. Right there at all the big rocks.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but he's not the only one that's told me that. So
no, it's very true. It's this is actually my background as a geologist, coastal geologist. So this was kind of where I did my field work. But yeah, that area, and then also up in the state park, which blew out during Michael, were two historic inlets. It wants to open up and become a barrier island, but we're not letting it, is why they have to keep putting those rocks there. So eventually it will probably flood out, and then we'll have to do something else. But yeah, there's a historic inlet there, and then also up in the state park that blew out during Michael.
I think the last time I fished there with Cleve was 2 years ago. It was right after Michael. We did the podcast on Mexico Beach and Michael, and then we came back and did a podcast with Cleve about fishing. But when we were there, all those little cuts out toward the tip of the Cape were still cut. I mean, there was still a little water flowing through them, I guess. I don't know if they've filled in since then, but we had talked about going over there, but we ended up fishing too long, so as usual. So
yeah, they filled in. It filled in not long afterwards. It's most of those inlets are just the pressure relief valves from storms. Once it calms down, they quickly fill back in.
It's always shifting, always moving, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a high energy environment, that's for sure.
Yes. Let's go on and Cole asked this question. As I talked to him about the question, he was mainly pointing it toward the traveling angler. So a lot of folks come down for a week. They get to fish for a half a day or 2 days. It's not like most people will be able to hire a guide for a week and go tarpon fishing for, 6 straight days or anything like that. But in the bays along the Forgotten Coast, what types of fish and crustaceans should anglers be intimidated when wading? And he wants to specifically know for redfish.
It's a good question. I get asked that quite a bit. Red fishing's our primary target here. They're here year round. I call them indiscriminate eaters. They'll eat about anything that you throw in front of them, but mostly what they're eating is crabs, either blue crabs, fiddler crabs, and then you're looking at all the shrimp. We have manna shrimp, and then your bay shrimp, and then bait fish. We're looking at the same that tarpon eat. Mostly they eat finger mullets. A lot of finger mullets, a lot of mud minnows, different types of minnows that are long in the shallows. But the finger mullets is one of their favorites. We call finger mullets immature mullets that are usually less than like 6 inches long. Juvenile, we call them just finger mullet. Those are the big ones. Pinfish is another one. Pinfish is a really good bait in the dead of winter because it's the one bait fish that doesn't leave. It's always here. So pinfish you can fish, and when it's cold in February and there's no shrimp in the water or anything like that, the pinfish are always. Usually we'll resort to tying a lot of pinfish in the winter, which is basically the same as a tarpon, a flat bait fish pattern, usually in fluorescence, kind of mahi colors, and then put some stripes on it, and it works really well for speckled trout as well as redfish. For the people that are waiting, there's a couple of really good areas and things that we can get into. But one of the things that I get asked all the time is, what should I bring down with me? Like you said, most people are trout fishermen or something like that, and they want to come down, they want to try it out. Most of the fishing that we do, we use 8 weights. 8 weights covers 99% of fishing you'll do here. Weight forward floating lines work great. Leader size, we usually do 12 to 20 pounds, depending on what we're fishing. If we're targeting redfish or black drum or sheepshead that we know are sitting on oyster bars, then we'll up it to about a 20 pound. If we're fishing kind of just sand flats, grass beds, things like that, flooded marsh, then we'll do 12, 14, 15 pounds. So it just really depends on what you're targeting. The only reason we go up in the 20 pound is because we know that when you hook a redfish or a sheepshead or black drum on an oyster bar, the first thing he's going to do is take you down and try to cut you off and bury his nose in the oyster bars. So you got to be ready to get their nose up and get them out of those oyster bars pretty fast, or they'll cut you off.
We're going to back up just a tad. You said you have some shrimp patterns that I guess that work pretty well.
Yeah. Most shrimp patterns, we have a couple, and gurglers. We throw a lot of shrimp gurglers when it's a high flood. We get a good flood tide, not like South Carolina does, but we get good flood tides. And a lot of times those marsh grasses will flood, and you can throw gurglers, shrimp gurglers up into the flooded grass. That way it'll keep them out of the grass, but also gives you a nice little pop on the water. And those seem to work really well. We tie a lot of laser dubbing shrimp. Most shrimp patterns work. Shrimp are really easy. Throw some eyes on it, throw a little piece of bucktail or something for it, and then wrap the shank of the hook and put a little weight on it. And that's pretty easy to do. I tie a pattern called a milkshake, and that's been my kind of go-to. And it's a mashup of two flies that actually Dave, that you spoke of earlier, gave me. When I first started, Dave was very helpful for me. He came in the shop and handed me all of his patterns and said, "You're welcome to tie them and sell them." And so I tied a bunch of them, and then I mashed a bunch of them together and came up with a milkshake, and it works really well. It's a shrimp pattern that I use. It's also my kind of claim to fame, is it got my personal best redfish in Louisiana. So 40 pounder, which was nice.
Okay.
On a milkshake. Yeah.
That works.
So that was happy. Happy to catch that on that. We thought it was a black drum, and then come to find out it was a big red. So that was really nice. But yeah, shrimp patterns are pretty standard. Nothing special with them, but they really work. Definitely one thing I would recommend for people coming down here, if you're tying your own or buying them, is to buy them or make them with a weed guard. Weed guards are really important. And worst case, if you don't need it, you can always cut it off with nippers if you don't need it. But it's always good to have them. And then if, like I said, if you don't need it, cut it off.
Better to have than not have then.
Absolutely. Yeah. You get down here and you're trying to fish grass beds and you don't have weed guards. It's a long day.
Right. Small world, because I fished with Dave for tarpon, and he told me he played out the whole morning, the number of chances we were going to get, the waves of fish that were going to come. And it played out exactly like he said. I mean, almost to the minute. He was so knowledgeable about the day, and he understood that. All right, this is David's first time down, or this probably was my first time down. I just told him, I said, "Look, I don't know what the heck I'm doing." So he just handed me a rod that he had made, and said, "Here, just show me what you can cast." And he set the boat up, and we got 3 waves of fish, and he said the last wave is when you'll have your best chance, and that's when we got our eat and got cut off right away. I didn't have a chance at it, but the point is he was so knowledgeable, and then you said that he helped you whenever you started.
Yeah, there's a handful of guides that I'm really thankful for, and it's easy to forget. I think when you start to gain momentum of kind of who helped you through it. I've got a couple. Dave, Brett Martino, he was my first customer as a commercial tire. And, he really got me going on it and really gave me good feedback and helped me work on flies and, sit in his garage and working on flies and stuff like that. It was really helpful in learning and just having his knowledge because it's easy to tie flies and sell them. But when you have a guide telling you, well, that doesn't work, that's pretty, but it doesn't work, or that's way too much material. Most guides think if you have for a redfish fly, if you tie more than 3 different types of material on a redfish fly, you're overdoing it. It's a waste. So, the beauty of talking with guides about tying flies is that they are usually very simple, minimalistic flies, but they catch fish. And that's the beauty of that, is 3 or 4 pieces of material and almost guaranteed they'll catch a fish.
It's a lot about how do I present this fly. And it's good that you're giving some tips here along the way of tying the fly upside down from what you would think it would be tied on the hook and why. Those are the sorts of things that I think us as people that trout fish 51 weeks out of the year, we need to know as much of these types of things as we can know when we head down your way to fish that 1 week. Or maybe you only get to fish 1 day out of that whole week, or maybe you just want to fish 1 day. I used to fish every day whenever I come down there. And now I'm like, I'll get somebody, get on a boat somewhere, go out for a day, and that'll just have to be fine, because I'm not going to say you get tired of it. I'm not tired of it by any means, but priorities tend to change after you've been doing it for 20 or so years. You're just you want to pack in a week's worth of fishing in 1 day, and sometimes you can do that. If the day goes just right, yeah, you can do it and you'll be super content. So all that's good information, Kevin, really good. So far, so good. It's helpful. Let's move on to the next question here. And David, that's me, I want to know about triple tail. I've eaten triple tail at the Owl Cafe. It was like everything they've got. It is excellent. That food down there is outstanding. But let's talk about catching them from a boat. Number one, where should I be? Two, what do I do about stalking them? And again, let's kind of stay in the boat here. How do I recognize them? And then how do we catch the bigger ones? Because obviously we're all, like you mentioned your 40-pound redfish. You didn't mention the other 200 that you caught that weren't 40 pounds, We want to know how, everybody wants to know how to catch the bigger fish. Let's talk about catching triple tail, and let's talk about catching them from the boat.
Boats, definitely the easiest way, if not the only way to catch them around here, because it's a lot of boating. Usually what you do is you kind of bounce around from buoy to buoy, crab pots, pilings, any kind of structure in the water that you can see. Mostly for us, it's in Apalachicola Bay. As it gets later in the summer, they'll start to spread out, but initially they're mostly in the Apalachicola Bay for us. It really is just driving around looking for them. So when I say looking for them, first thing you want to do is look for buoys, something like that. And as you start to approach it, the buoy, you'll see them literally floating on the water. They kind of look like a trash bag, a black trash bag sitting there on the water. Sometimes they'll be slightly under it and it looks maybe like grass hanging there, but once you see a couple of them, you'll definitely recognize them. But those are usually smaller ones that are on the, not saying that you can't catch a big triple tail on the buoys, but usually the ones that you see floating on the buoys are smaller. Usually they're fun to catch. They're more aggressive. Definitely will chase flies. You throw live bait, but we've started really targeting them the last couple of summers with flies, and they're really receptive to flies, which is fun. And again, mostly shrimp patterns. That's primarily what they're in the bay eating is a shrimp. So they throw shrimp flies at them works really well. Something that has a lot of movement in the water. Redfish doesn't have to have a lot of movement. They'll find it. But when you're looking for triple tail, you definitely got to get their attention because they're hanging out looking, and they're looking for stuff to swim by them. So if you can get it in front of them and they see it, they'll usually they're laying on their side and they'll flip up, and then they'll just start to chase it. And then it's just the chasing game. It's pretty fun.
Oh, I bet that is. That sounds like a blast.
There's also what we call free swimmers, which is exactly what it says. Usually they're larger ones that are just free swimming out in the middle of the water, no structure. They're just hanging out there. And a lot of times you'll see those when you're running from buoy to buoy. You'll see those and run over them, not literally, but you'll run right beside them, and then they'll drop down out of the water. One thing that I would recommend is that if you do run over one, turn back around to where it was, turn off the engines, get set up, and more than likely that fish will pop right back up and it'll sit. It's kind of like when you spook a deer. You spook a deer and you sit there, most of the time that deer is just going to do a big loop and come right back to where it was. So it's kind of the same thing where if you spook that triple tail, more than likely he's going to pop back up somewhere in the vicinity where at least you can catch it and get on him. Now, those are big ones usually, the free swimmers. And there's some guys out here that have tuna towers. We call them triple tail towers. They have tuna towers on their boats, so it's really easy to see them from a distance. One thing that we've noticed is that when you're back on the buoys and all you see is small ones, we've noticed that there's usually little ones on top and then larger ones underneath them, but you have to get the small ones off because they're more aggressive. So we've kind of implemented a tag team where one of us will tease them off with live bait or a shrimp, spinning rod or something like that, and tease them off, get them away from the buoy. And then the next person will come in with a fly. And if you do it this way, you need a fly that is a little bit heavier because you're going to need it to go down pretty fast because they're going to be deeper in the water. And you need to get down there fast because usually these are out in the middle of the bay. There's usually some current. But if you can get that fly down fast below that crab pot or whatever is down there, there's usually a bigger one that you don't even see down there. And that's kind of what we've noticed the last couple of years, that the bigger ones are usually there with the small ones, but they're usually lower down. So if you get lower in the water column, you usually can catch a bigger one and pull it up.
Bait and switch, I guess, kind of to pull those but to pull the little ones off, not to switch out the bait, but to pull the little ones off to get to the one you're really looking for. And who would have thought it unless you've done it enough times to say, hey, there's a pattern here.
Yeah, usually it really came about when we were catching them, and we would catch one, and then the next guy that was with us was fly fishing too, and he would throw in right behind us. And the first person would be catching the small, and then the next one would hook up and it would be a large one. So we started seeing this pattern emerge where, maybe these small ones are floating and then the bigger ones are down below. And that kind of where that came from. So yeah, it's still kind of a new fishery for us. I mean, they've been around, I think, forever, but last 5 years, they've really kind of exploded in the bay, and they're starting to get targeted more. But But also we're starting to see that in the heat of the summer, there's tarpon, redfish for a little while the flats get so hot, you can only fish them in the morning and the evenings. And if you're not tarpon fishing, there's definitely stuff you can fish, but triple tail is a great eating fish, as you know. Cassie and Melvin that own the owl, they really know how to cook up.
Yes, they do.
They do a tie snapper. I have to just say this. They do a tie snapper that's incredible. Little mangrove snappers that are deep fried.
And I know we're talking about Kevin's Forgotten Coast Fly Company. I get that, but I'm telling you, the Owl Cafe, if you're down in that area, I've never been in there that I didn't make a reservation just to make sure I could get in. And there have been some empty seats, but I recommend getting a reservation, even if they say, you don't need one at that time of the day. Get one anyway, just in case. And I haven't had anything there that I didn't absolutely love. Nothing. Everything I've ever had there is just absolutely outstanding. I can't say enough about that. And everybody that I've sent there said the same thing. So
yeah, their Gulf, their shrimp are probably our favorites. That's probably one of the favorites things. And then in the tap room, which is below it, the bar below it, you can get the full range of Oyster City beer, but they also have Melvin's chicken wings.
Oh,
and those are some of the best. And we've eaten all the wings in the area, so we get a lot of food recommendations, or we get asked a lot of food recommendations at the fly shop. So, but yeah, his wings are the best. They're not too hot, but they're perfect. And they're big.
Well, yeah. I may we'll have to try those. I want to know. So let's go back to the triple tail just for a minute. So I remember in the late '80s, early '90s, somewhere in there, redfish was over harvested. And they shut down the fishing for redfish, and then they tried to build them back up. Do you ever have this notion that maybe targeting triple tail, because they do taste so good, that maybe something will happen, and maybe there's that we need to be doing something to preserve them? Doesn't mean that you can't take any home. Maybe a size limit, slot limit, something like that. Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a concern. We're, as we sit and watch more boats on the water, I think this year is more than last year. And I think every year it's going to be more and more boats down here. And with the triple tail just being so easy to catch and sight fish and see them. And most times, especially with live bait, they're probably going to bite on live bait. So they're really easy to catch. So yeah, I think there definitely needs to be some conservation measurements put in place. I mean, I think I've talked with FWC to try to get them on board, and we're starting to get some momentum with it. I think the big thing for me is to put an upper size limit like there is on redfish.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fish. There's a small limit, but there's no upper size, but there is with redfish. I think it would really help with triple tail to put that same idea in place, because usually your bigger, large, 15, 18 pound triple tails, which is what we can catch in the bay, those are your big breeders, and then you're just taking them out, out of the water. And right now the limit's 2. I'd like to see it dropped to 1. So I think with dropping the limit to 1 and then putting the slot limit on it, you're really going to preserve those big fish that are out there and the ones that are really reproducing and carrying on. And there's plenty of fish out there for people to eat and take home. And I mean, it is a good eating fish, and I don't blame people for wanting to come and target them, but it seems like it's always a reaction here with FWC and things where it's, the fishery is severely in decline. Now we need to fix it instead of being a little proactive. So I think that would be our goal, would be to try to get them to be proactive about it before they start to, and they have their science behind what they do. And I understand that. Hopefully we can get some momentum going and get them to at least put the upper slot limit on it. I like to see, there's also like things that I have issues with where guides can keep the fish that they catch and give it to the clients, which I don't understand that. If you're taking a client out, then the client should be able to keep their fish. But if you catch a fish, then you should go back and it shouldn't harvest that and give it to your clients. And then triple tail is one of those that you can do it with. And those are just some simple things I think that would make a big deal for us down here. We're just seeing more and more people targeting them. I mean, you go out in the summer out here and cruise around the buoys, and I mean, it's 30, 40 boats that are just bouncing around the buoys, in any given day. So yeah, it's getting more and more popular.
Well, I kind of hate that I mentioned it, but it does seem like a great fish for the fly.
It is, yeah. And bringing attention to it, it's not, we've talked about it, whether or not to kind of really start to push it or not, and really promote it in the fly shop as far as flies targeting triple tail directly, but also with bringing it to the attention is also good because it's conversation. And I think that's what needs to happen, is just conversation about these fish. And if you don't talk about it, then all of a sudden, it's too far gone. So I'd rather be proactive about it and let's start talking about it and seeing if there's anything to do than 5 years down the road when they're gone or such small numbers that they have to just stop the whole season, and put a moratorium on it or something like that. So, we're still on the fence with it. There's some good research. There's some tagging going on, which is really nice. There should be a lot more data coming out in the next couple of years about what they're doing, how they're migrating, how many are being really harvested based on the tags and stuff. So I think with that information that the universities are doing and the FWC getting a hold of it, I think there'll be some changes, hopefully.
As much as I love to eat at the Owl, I wouldn't catch one and take it there and let them cook it. You mentioned that wait until the fish are pretty much gone. That particular fish is depleted. And I think you look back at the redfish and the way that redfish were harvested for many different things. And then they had to put the brakes on and say, all right, hold on a second. We've over harvested, basically, is where we were. The road we were headed down was not having enough to go around, and they put the brakes on. And now we get to come back down there. We all go to Louisiana, fish down there for these redfish, and it's a blast. And you can also, you can get them on the menu from places too. So it's kind of there's a balance there. But if you let it go too far, it just takes so long to build back up and get, that good catching fish. Doing something about it now makes a lot of sense. And, there's two sides to every coin. There's the guy that makes his living out there taking somebody out to the buoy and throwing a spinning rod in there and saying, here's one, catch it. And the whole thing about catching a fish for a client, that's kind of a no-no in the fly zone anyway. That's something that we just don't do that. Guides just don't do that. You don't even really like to fish at all. Even when somebody hands you a rod, a fly guy doesn't like to pick up the rod and cast it and say, here, let me show you how to catch the fish and catch one. You can show them, but you don't really want to catch it. You want them to do it. It's a different experience most of the time for the fly folks than it is like the bait and the gear guys. It's just a different thing. There's not a right or wrong.
It's a different mentality for sure. We see both sides of it. I've got friends that guide we call them meat guides. We've got meat guides here, and I've got fly guides, and we talk all the time about everything. And it's you're right. They make their living by filling the icebox, and you can't blame them for that. And they're really good at it, and they're really good at what they do. And I hope that we can be a little proactive with some of these. Just not only livelihood, but just be good stewards to it. It's a delicate system that can tip anyway. I mean, you look at Tampa Bay right now with what's going on down there, and it's heartbreaking.
That is.
And just I think the lack of action down there right now, from what I'm seeing. I don't live down there, but I'm watching it as close as I can, and not really seeing anybody stepping up and really denouncing it or anything like that. It's kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of stuff on Facebook, but I don't see anything anywhere else really.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for Facebook and basically Captains for Clean Water and Dustin Pack and those guys down there that they're doing what they can, I don't think anybody would really know about it. And one accident up the river from us could do the same thing to us.
True.
We're one small accident away from it. There's some pretty bad things that are right on the rivers when you go up the rivers that some accident could happen, and we could be right there with them. Very fine line we're playing.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff up and down that river too. I mean, that river goes way further than just through Florida too. There's a lot of other stuff that plays into that. So, well, I got one more question. So I guess this would be the closing question. What question did we not ask that would be very helpful for the angler that's coming down and fishing?
I think the biggest question that I get asked at the shop is, and it's a big misconception that I usually try to explain to people, is about the color of the fly. Most people think that when you are fishing clear water, let's throw a dark fly because it will allow the fish to see the fly better. And yes, it does. But the downside to that is that it actually allows the fish to see the fly better. And it can decipher that, hey, that's not a real bait. That's not a real pogey, so I'm not going to attack it. But if you are throwing a white fly in clear water, it just gives the fish a perception of the bait. So they're more interested in it. So they go investigate it more. And then you get your trigger reactions from the movement of the fly. And same thing here. And that's like St. Joe Bay, where it's really clear, Cape San Blas, that area. But over here where the water's stained from the river, we don't fish really anything, for the most part, lighter than a rust. Maybe a tan on a good clean day, but anything lighter than a rust, because we want that dark that purple and black, that all they see is a mild silhouette in that tan, that stained water. So they'll come up and take a look at it. If you threw a chartreuse in tan water, I mean, probably because it's tan, it wouldn't be the same reaction as the other way around. But if you throw a black and purple in clear water, they're going to see that, and they're going to see exact outline of it, and they're going to be like, that thing's not real at all. So that's the biggest thing that I say is match the watercolor. A lot of people come with the perception that we need to throw the opposite of it to make it more attractive, and that's the exact opposite of what you can do when you're fly fishing around here for salt.
So if I'm in St. Joe Bay, I'm going to go white, close to white. If I switch over and get into Apalachicola Bay, the river, Apalachicola River, is more tannic type of water, so it's got some color to it. I'm going to go darker there.
Yeah, and black and purple. I mean, black and purple is kind of our go-to over here. On this side of the Cape, it's black and purple. Black and purple, rusts, olives. When you get on the other side and you get in that clear water, it's rusts would be the darkest I would go. Tan, chartreuse, and white, all white, things like that.
And then what if I went even further east? And I don't know what the inside of Alligator Point is. Is it fairly clear? I can't think of if there's a river that comes in there, and I don't think there is there?
No, but it's still part of the bay, so it's still all that kind of tannic water. Most everything on this side of the Cape is all tannic. When you get over into the Apalachee Bay, which is St. Mark's and stuff, a lot of those rivers that are feeding that are spring feds, like Wakulla, those. So you do have really clean water coming into it. So those days it varies, because depending on the winds and things like that, you might throw an olive one day and then turn around and the wind shifted and it's super clear, because all that over there is open water also. So you don't have the barrier islands protecting it to preserve it. So over there, it's a totally different fishery, which is kind of nice. That's what I mean. Like, as you walk along the Forgotten Coast, it's all different fisheries and all different environments and totally different games in each spot. But yeah, that's kind of the idea over there. The spring feds are really neat, because it keeps the water cool, because all that spring fed rivers are always a constant temperature.
That's crazy. I've never even thought about it. I don't fish down there enough to really think through a lot of those things, but I can definitely see that bay. I've got some friends that dive up there in some of those springs, I guess, or some of those, I call them caves or whatever. I know they go over there and do that quite a bit. And I guess they do it because it's clear, if I think about it. And then they go up toward somewhere north of Panama City too. Whole other story. But now that you say that makes sense. You know, that they're fed by clear springs and stuff, where the Apalachee Bay is more fed by the Apalachicola River. So one more thing. So Indian Pass comes out of, I would say, Apalachicola Bay. Do you kind of see that the same way? Is that
St. Vincent Sound is right there, so that's the narrow sound right there between St. Vincent, which is the large kind of triangle island, and then the mainland. So yeah, basically, if you're coming from the Cape and heading east, you go through Indian Pass, then you'll go through St. Vincent, which is pretty small, and then once it opens up, then you get into Apalachicola Bay.
That explains why that water coming out of there that runs between St. Vincent and that's still kind of the Cape, but I know it's not, but to me it kind of is. But yeah, that water that runs through there is, you know, dark and bay looking, and then as you turn that corner, it actually clears up almost all of a sudden. Maybe not all of a sudden, but real close to all of a sudden. It's like two different worlds. You go from dirty looking water that's got that tea stain, like you said, and then you kind of turn the corner and all of a sudden it's just nice clear blue, almost Caribbean water. It's so clear and nice.
Yeah, there's also between Indian Pass and that kind of where the rocks are on the Cape, you also have Money Bayou, which is a pretty dark river that comes out right there. It's a pretty popular shark fishing area. That Money Bayou, from the Money Bayou right around the rocks area, is pretty popular shark. For some reason, those sharks like that dark water right there coming out of the Money Bayou.
A friend of mine's got a story about fishing there, and it was we were talking about large hammerheads earlier. That's what he saw right there, a really big one that put the fear in him. Well, and I want to do a shark on the fly podcast sometime. So if you could think of anybody that's really good at shark on the fly, and I know that's not really a targeted species, I've caught them on the fly, and dang if they aren't fun. I mean, they pull. When they go. I was, and this is a side story, but when I was fishing with Dave, we fished for tarpon in the morning, then we ran over to Little St. George, and we were just pulling along Little St. George, hitting those pockets and stuff, and nothing was happening. It was hotter than blazes. I think it was July, and we just, I just want to spend a day out on the water. So I said, let's go across the bay and hit Little St. George, see if we can find a redfish, and we couldn't. About a 3-foot shark came by, and I just watched it go by, and I said, you think I ought to throw at these sharks? And he said, oh, yeah, throw at them. Heck yeah. Well, the next one was about 8 foot long. It was big. And I threw at it, and it took it. And, man, it peeled off every bit of line faster than anything I've ever seen in my life. It just, when it took off and when it made a turn, I guess it just bit through the line, and I got back nothing. But, boy, you talk about fun. Golly. And it came by, and I just turned around and looked at him. He was on the polling platform, and I just leaned out and, cast it at it. So I'm kind of casting like this, kind of leaned out to the side. So I wasn't about to be able to set the hook. I mean, I just so out of form there and so out of the way that I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. I mean, when he hit it, he must have felt something though. And when he ran, he was gone. Oh, it was so much fun. So I'd love to do a shark fishing show. I think that would be a blast.
The standard color for shark flies is life jacket orange.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's pretty much what everybody throws. You'll see it's a really hard color to match, but that's what everybody shoots for is life. And I'm not sure if it's because of life jackets or if it's just the color, but that's what everybody asks for. I've tied some shark flies because the guys will fish for those sharks down at Stump Hole where the cape comes in that elbow. It's all those bars that go out.
Yeah,
it's a really popular shark fishing spot, and we've thrown some. I had another buddy that was trying to. There was no state record for bonnet head shark, which are the little hammerheads with a round front.
Right.
So he just wanted to catch one just to get the record, and so he just caught a little baby one. But since there was no record, he got the record for that. But it was that was the same color. Yeah. So if you ever want to go shark fishing, or at least have it in your fly box, that's the color you shoot for is life jacket orange.
Life jacket orange. That's funny in so many different ways too. I think that was a pretty good conversation, Kevin. So if you're visiting the Forgotten Coast or are in Apalachicola, or if you're getting ready to fish the salt anywhere and you're looking for gear, including flies, innovative flies, I think I would cruise the Forgotten Coast Fly Company website. You can call Kevin, call his staff down there, visit ForgottenCoastFlyCompany.com. They've got a lot, and I cruised the website the other day before we talked our first time, and lots of good stuff on there. He's got some merch on there as well. You can meet Kevin at the store, and if you're wondering who Kevin is, we'll go through that again. He's the owner and chief fly tyer of the Forgotten Coast Fly Company. He designs and ties all sorts of saltwater fly patterns, and you heard about some of them here. And he's got some innovative ideas that have some really good information from behind them, because he works with the guides down there, and he works with some of the tires that I know as well, to kind of hone in those flies and get those patterns, to where they'll catch fish and not be so heavy and hard to cast that it's kind of fruitless to have them. So good flies. He's on the pro staff at Dinah King, Arex Hooks, and go fly fishing. Kevin, man, I really appreciate you stopping by and taking up your time to visit with us.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been. If you find value in the Southeastern Fly Podcast in any of these episodes, check out the merch at southeasternfly.com/store. That supports the podcast. Thanks to all the folks who have already supported the show through their purchases in the store. Please subscribe to the Southeastern Fly Podcast, or share it with your friends. And thanks for joining us. See you next time on Southeastern Fly.